The first rays of dawn fell across the cracked pavement as an old man shuffled slowly toward the bank, his back bent from years of hard labor, his eyes fixed on the ground as though afraid of the world's gaze. His hands clutched a small faded passbook the way a drowning man might cling to a piece of wood. The passbook was his last link to a life that had slipped away, a fragile promise of dignity in a city that barely noticed him. His clothes were neat but threadbare. Washed so many times the colors had long since faded into pale shadows. His shoes were worn to the soles, but he walked with the careful determination of someone who had learned to move through life quietly, without complaint, without help. Everyone who saw him that morning would later remember the way his eyes looked, full of exhaustion, yet still holding a flicker of something stronger than hope. Before we go deeper into his journey, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen in ordinary lives, please take a moment to like this video, comment with your thoughts, share it with someone who needs to hear this story today, and subscribe to our channel Hidden Hearts. Together we can keep telling stories that remind the world how powerful compassion can be. His name was Arif. Years ago, he had been the kind of man people respected without thinking twice, a teacher in a small rural school, known for his patience, his fairness, and the way he treated even the poorest children like they were his own. For 3 decades he taught under a corrugated iron roof, chalk dust settling into the wrinkles of his hands, his voice guiding hundreds of children toward a future he would never see. He never became rich, but he had a wife who loved him and a home that smelled of fresh bread and books. Life was modest but full. Then came the storms life reserves for the gentle. His wife fell ill, and the local clinic referred her to a hospital in the city. Arif spent his entire savings on treatment, selling his land, his furniture, his books. When she died, the hospital bill still waited at his door, unpaid. He left his village with nothing but a few clothes and the old bank passbook containing what little was left. In the years that followed, he drifted from place to place, tutoring when he could, sleeping in tiny rented rooms, eating less than he should. His health began to mirror his circumstances, thin, worn, and fragile. But he never lost that small passbook. It was his one tether to the idea that somewhere in some ledger he still existed. He had tried several times to check the account. His bank had merged with another, then another. Branches closed, systems changed, and no one seemed to know where his account had gone. Each time he was turned away, he walked back to his small room in silence, the passbook tucked under his shirt like a secret. Now, years later, with his rent overdue and his strength fading, he decided to try one last time. He walked for hours under the rising sun, feet blistering in his old shoes to reach the biggest branch in the city. He told himself that if they turned him away here too, he would accept that the account was gone. Inside, the bank was cool and bright, smelling of paper and polished floors. People in neat clothes filled out forms or stared at their phones. Arif stood in line quietly, shoulders hunched, rehearsing the words he would say. When it was his turn, he placed his passbook on the counter and asked softly if they could help him check the balance. The young teller glanced at the passbook, her expression flickering with impatience. She told him the account was too old, the system different, that he needed to update his information. Arif explained, voice trembling, that he didn't know how, that he had walked miles already, that this was his last hope. Desperation cracked through his voice as he said he would pay double any fee if only they would check. At that, a few customers nearby smirked. The bank manager, a man in a crisp suit with the self-assurance of someone who had never known hunger, overheard and chuckled. "Double?" he said loudly enough for others to hear. "Sir, that passbook is older than some of my employees. You're lucky if it's worth anything at all." His laugh was sharp, not cruel exactly, but dismissive. One more blow to a man already bent under the weight of invisible burdens. Arif's cheeks flushed with humiliation, but he didn't move. He stood there, eyes lowered, fingers gripping the passbook like a lifeline. He thought of his wife's voice telling him to keep trying, to never give up. The manager waved him off, but a young employee passing by stopped. She took the passbook gently, reading the faded ink. Something in her face changed. She asked Arif his full name and typed it into her system. Her eyes widened. She whispered to the manager, who frowned and took over the keyboard himself. The manager's smirk dissolved as he stared at the screen, his color draining. The busy hum of the bank seemed to fade as he straightened and cleared his throat. He asked Arif, suddenly polite, to please follow him to his office. Arif didn't understand. He shuffled behind the manager, heart thudding. In the office, the truth spilled out slowly, like light through blinds. His account wasn't dormant. It had been growing. Years ago, one of Arif's poorest students, a boy who had lost his father young, whom Arif had tutored after school for free, had grown up to become a successful businessman. Quietly, without telling anyone, he had tracked down his old teacher's account and begun depositing money into it every month, thanking him in the only way he knew. With compounded interest, the balance had swelled far beyond anything Arif could have imagined. The numbers on the screen didn't look real. For a long moment, Arif simply stared. His hands trembled too much to hold the pen they offered him. Tears blurred his vision. The manager who had laughed minutes ago now looked deeply ashamed. He apologized, offered tea, called in staff to help process the paperwork. Arif signed slowly, still half afraid it might vanish if he blinked. All those years of hunger, of walking miles to be turned away, of living like a ghost, they collapsed into a single moment of overwhelming relief. Outside the office, word spread. Customers who had smirked now stared in awe. Some whispered, some wiped at their eyes. The young employee stayed by Arif's side, explaining each form patiently. As he left the bank hours later, the same people who had ignored him stepped aside. But Arif didn't notice. He was looking up at the sky, lips moving in a quiet prayer of thanks to his wife, to his student, to life itself for reminding him that kindness never dies. That evening, Arif walked to a small roadside tea stall where he used to sit when he first arrived in the city. Back when he still thought he might go home one day, he ordered a cup of tea and watched the street. For the first time in years, the world seemed to glow a little warmer. He thought about his student, now a man of influence, whose life he had once touched without expecting anything in return, and realized that a single act of kindness, however small, can ripple outward for decades. It had taken him years to learn the lesson he had once taught. That goodness always comes back, though never in the way we expect. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you of the quiet power of gratitude, resilience, and kindness, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a glimmer of hope, subscribe to Hidden Hearts, and leave a comment below. Your engagement helps us continue to tell stories that move and inspire people around the world. And before we close this chapter, we have a special request. Comment below and tell us about a moment when kindness, whether given or received, changed your life. We read every story, and yours might be the one that gives someone else the courage to keep going.